particular clock. So just a reminder before we start this webinar, this this Zoom session is actually being recorded and is being live streamed on YouTube. Now the link to the YouTube stream will actually be posted in the chat. Kindly keep your microphones muted during the presentation so that we can hear the speakers to present and also the reactors in presenting their views on the topic. You may use the Zoom chat for your questions and comments, and please accomplish the evaluation form. The link to the evaluation form will be given to you at the end of the webinar. Before we start, let us begin with the national anthem, Philippine national anthem, and also an opening prayer.
Alam ng puso sa dibdib mo'y buhay, lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiting, sa manlulupig, di ka pasisiin, sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong bakaw, may nilagang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal, ang kislap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagdiningning, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may magdidilim, lupa ng araw ng walhati pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Ang hinikaya na pag may mga api, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Recording in progress.
Omo namong nama. Oni koning bebiyanga mo. No tipo mikloni. Kwanga hamo. Tina hamo. Kodayit king mo inang namo kloni. Dayit kibalo namo. Oleto padomo namo. Pogobi namo kloni. Pinaagi ning dait no Kristo Jesus. Amen.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we thank you for another day that you have blessed us to come and gather. May each and every individual present be enlightened with your grace as we seek and uncover your divine purpose for all of our events activities. May your light find its way into the lives of every individual who has made this day possible. Lord God, it is our earnest prayer that your will be done throughout this event. Guide our intentions to align with your holy will. May all our efforts become a blessing to the rest of the community that we will be serving and bring glory to your name. Guide us to become leaders who are blanketed with love, service, and hope for the world that we will be serving. All these we ask in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Good afternoon, all. I'm pleased to welcome you to the webinar today entitled Food Security, Social Safety Nets, and Social Protection. This is the second part in the series focusing on the policy and governance of sustainable food systems. As you know, the issue of food sustainability has been very important as the Philippines has had a high level of undernutrition prevalence, around 14.77% from 2017 to 2019, and also child stunting, more than 30% in the same period, which has been exacerbated more recently by the economic lockdowns during the COVID pandemic. The recent inflationary prices of basic food items have resulted in further increasing the number of Filipinos who suffer from malnutrition. Since the mid-2020s, the Working Group on Sustainable Development Goals 2.0 Hunger, which is organizing the webinar today, which started out as an informal gathering of food security advocates or faculty members and administrative staff of the Ateneo de Manila, Xavier University, Ateneo de Cagayan, and the Ateneo de Davao University and the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, or SDSN Philippines, has been organizing webinars on various themes and topics related to food systems, shifting to a narrow focus only on single sectors related to hunger, such as agricultural production, health, nutrition, and the environment, towards a more systems thinking approach for far-reaching analysis and understanding of the complexity and the interconnectedness of our food problems and challenges. I am Randy Tuaño, the Dean of the Ateneo School of Government. Ateneo de Manila University will serve as moderator for this afternoon session. For the webinars this year, the working group has identified the overall framework of policy and governance in order to identify executive and legislative policy alternatives regarding 5 critical subject areas of food sustainability, which are very critical to be addressed in the country, including the following. The first webinar we held was entitled Securing Food Availability, Sustainability, and Access, which was organized last March 1. The webinar this afternoon entitled Social Protection and Safety Nets. The third webinar, the Nutrition, Health, Water, Sanitation, and Hygiene and Food Safety, which will be held on July 19. The fourth webinar on land water resources, which will be held on September 13, and the fifth and last webinar in this series on food waste and the environment on November 8th. In each of these webinars, we will focus on the current state of the particular subject areas that will then be followed by a discussion on the legislative, policy, and governance issues and concerns related to the subject area. For the first webinar last March, a discussion on the availability and sustainability of and access of food was undertaken, and that also explored the role of policy and governance in addressing issues related to agriculture production, food security and nutrition, and in covering insights and sharing experiences and perspectives related to the access of food and food availability in the light of increasing food prices, developing sustainability in food, agriculture, and nutrition in order to feed our country. The objective of today's webinar is to promote awareness on social protection as a critical area of food security and nutrition towards meeting a food systems transformation to sustainably feed our growing population, which is now 100 million and growing. It is our hope that our policymakers can consider a set of policy recommendations around social protection issues to alleviate poverty and ensure food security and nutrition for the marginalized sectors. We are very pleased to have 3 presentations today who will actually provide an overall view of social protection programs in food security, the perspectives of the national government in providing social protection programs related to food security, and the third, also on the perspective of the local governments in addressing the same issue. Afterwards, we will have 2 reactors, one from the business sector and another from the government sector, who will also provide some perspectives on the policy recommendations and also governance recommendations needed in these areas. For our first speaker this afternoon, who will provide an overview of social protection programs in food security and also discuss the overall framework for social protection in government and how this relates to food sustainability, we will have a presentation by Dr. Fernando T. Aldaba. Dr. Aldaba, or Nandi as he's called, is Professor of Economics and former Dean of the School of Social Sciences at the Ateneo de Manila University. He's currently a Senior Fellow for Eagle Watch, the Macroeconomic Forecasting Unit of the Economics Department of the same university. He was also former Chair of the Economics Department and has been teaching undergraduate and graduate economics in the university since 1996. in the areas of macroeconomics, development, and labor economics, and his current areas are in social protection, economic growth, poverty, social capital, and labor migration in the Philippines and in the ASEAN. He was former president of the Philippine Economic Society and is currently vice president of the East Asian Economic Association. Dr. Aldaba graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Management Engineering in 1980 from the Ateneo de Manila, and he also finished his doctorate in economics from the University of the Philippines in Diliman in 1996. Unfortunately, Dr. Aldaba cannot join the webinar today, but he has provided a recording which we will show in a while. Xavi, maybe we can already show Dr. Aldaba's presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers of this very relevant webinar on food security and social protection. I'm very glad to share my thoughts on issues related to food security and social protection. So let me give you the outline of my presentation. First, I'd like to talk about the current context of having a high headline in food inflation. Then I'll discuss the impacts of the food and energy crisis on the households in the Philippines. Then go to the government strategies and programs as a response to this food and energy crisis. I will also be discussing the role of the private and civil society sector in delivering programs and initiatives against hunger and malnutrition. And finally, I'll give you an overview of the different strategies and programs that the government actually can deliver during times of food and energy crisis from the demand and the supply side. And then I'll end with the summary and key takeaways. First, about the inflation situation. Headline inflation has gone up to 8.7% in January and 8.6% in February. The January statistic is actually a 14-year high. Unfortunately, last month, the inflation rate has slid down to 7.6%. Increases in food, fuel, and transport prices are the ones driving the current inflation. And these three items actually consist of more than 60% of the total expenditures of poor households. So when inflation go up, it's really the poorer households that take the brunt of the impact of this relatively high prices. So hunger incidence was recorded at 11.8% of families as of December 2022 by the social weather stations. And of course, any kind of food and energy crisis will really worsen malnutrition. As you see on the screen, this is the chart of the Philippine headline inflation rate. It's called headline inflation because it's the one reported in the media, actually. So take a look at this. The inflation rate started going up from April 2022 at a relatively fast rate. And of course, reaching its peak in January 2023 at 8.7%. The PSA also measures the food inflation rate, and as you see on your screen, the food inflation rate actually rose up to 10.8% in February 2023. The statistic from the SWS actually translates to around 3 million families experiencing hunger in the last 3 months of 2022. So it's still a lot of families really going hungry in the most recent statistic of the social weather stations. What are the impacts of this high inflation, which some people regard as a food and energy crisis? I have some work with the ILO and the World Food Program, and the World Food Program actually conducted a cell phone survey in the months when the inflation was relatively high. So this was what they found out. 1 in 10 households were actually food insecure, and most of them really had a high burden of food expenditure, 52% of monthly income. So this is similar to the almost 60% of the expenditure on the 3 items that I told you about earlier. 56% of households were really concerned about inflation and the supply of food. And it was found out that actually agricultural households spend a higher share of their income on food at around 66%, which is actually ironic because they're the ones supposedly producing food. And they were almost twice as likely to be food insecure than non-agri households. And the results also saw that 63% of households use at least one livelihood coping strategy in the past month, and borrowing food was the common coping strategy. Overall, well, the poorest regions had a higher proportion of food and insecure households, and that's understandable because the poorer households will have less income to purchase food items. And a more recent study by Dr. Roel Briones of PIDS noted the decreases in energy and nutrients intake, most especially vitamin A, which was reduced by 5.37%, followed by iron at 1.26%. What you see on your screen now are the top 10 regions with the high number of subsistence poor families in 2021. And I put their recent food inflation rates side by side with the region. And as you can see, there are even some regions with a double-digit food inflation rate. And given this, we know that this will really impact on the hunger incidence and the malnutrition rates of these regions. I also took the statistics on the regions with high subsistence incidence, and again, side by side, placed the current food inflation rates. One might note that we must consider both the number of families with high subsistence rate and also those with high subsistence incidence. So because you can have a high subsistence incidence, but the actual number of those suffering from below subsistence is not that big because the population of the region is small. You see on your screen again the other indicators on the impact on households. Well, the chart on your left, this is the global hunger index score for the Philippines, and the Philippines ranked 69th out of 121 countries in 2022 with a score of 14.8. Actually, the past 22 years, our score actually has gone down from over 20 to 14.8 in 2022. On the right side, you see the chart on the different malnourishment rates that includes undernourishment, child wasting, child stunting, and child mortality. As you can see, the changes or the decrease in these indicators, actually, they're just gradual. They're gradual improvements over the past 22 years. And I think the most important impact is on the very young children, especially those between 0 to 2 years old, and in particular those children in the first 1,000 days. For example, anemia, which could affect the neurocognitive function of children, is prevalent among the infants aged 6 to 11 months, and also, of course, among pregnant women. So we really must take care of our children during the first 1,000 days, because this is the most crucial stage where their brain will be affected, and the effect will be permanent rather than temporary. The high prevalence of anemia in adults can actually be attributed to the challenge of accessing meat and dairy because of the high prices of these products. Now, the government is very much aware of the problem. In fact, in the most recent Philippine Development Plan, Chapter 3.1 was dedicated on food security and proper nutrition. So the three main outcomes are stated on the screen. The first one is to have a sufficient and stable supply of food commodities. And you can do this by boosting productivity and resiliency of local agriculture, diversifying food supply sources, and streamlining trade regulatory measures, reviewing, for example, import quotas, import tariffs, etc. The second outcome is to make access of consumers to affordable, safe, and nutritious food. And we can do this by promoting investments in transport and logistics, the use of digital platforms, strengthening price and supply monitoring, and the promotion of food labeling and safety measures. And the third is to have nutrition across all ages improve. And we can do this by promoting healthy lifestyles, developing new technologies to increase nutritional content of food, and of course address malnutrition and improve nutrition governance. The National Nutrition Council also draft a plan for nutrition, an action plan for nutrition every administration. And right now they're drafting the plan of action for 2023 to 2028. But in the previous plan of action, they were already focusing on the first 1,000 days of life, and intensified mobilization of LGUs, targeting 38 provinces where wasting and stunting incidents are high, and also the focus on GDAS, the geographically isolated and disadvantaged areas, and the communities of indigenous people. During the Duterte administration, an interagency task force was created under Executive Order number 101. And the banner program is called the Enhanced Partnership Against Hunger and Poverty, which is the secretariat of which I think is based at the DSWD. The EPAP actually hopes to enhance social capital and optimize economic resource base through feeding programs, food production programs, and essential support services with the participation of CBOs or community-based organizations. What the program does is to match the supplier of food, which can be done by the CBOs or the farmers organizations, and match them with those in feeding programs like in schools. Another program by government, which was recently launched, this time by the Marcos administration, is the Philippine Multisectoral Program on Nutrition. And it's a multi-agency collaboration with NGOs, the private sector, and other stakeholders. This was initiated in December 2022 and officially launched March 30, 2023. Of course, I think it started even during the time of the Duterte administration. No, it's already really the Marcos administration. Sorry for that. The project has 5 components: nutrition governance, maternal and child nutrition, adolescent nutrition, food fortification, and behavior change communication. And they have targets to reduce stunting, wasting, and anemia prevalence. Our co-speaker, Ms. Elaine Soliman, will actually talk about the program in more detail later. The program is jointly spearheaded by the SWD and the DOH. During the Duterte administration, a multisectoral movement was actually also launched. It was called Pilipinas Contra Gutom, and they had 80 partner members from the private sector and NGOs. Again, on various anti-hunger programs and nutrition programs. It was led by then CABSEC Carlo Nograles, who's now the CSC chair. And it had a flagship program called Kain Tayo Pilipinas, which brings together feeding programs by various NGOs across the country, as well as an education program for mothers and children in their first 1,000 days of life. They also had an analytics map so that there will be zero overlap among the different efforts of the government and the NGOs. They were also opening up the donations from the public at 25 pesos per person that can be fed. That amount they said would already be sufficient for one meal, one nutritious meal. Unfortunately, the website of Kain Tayo Pilipinas does not exist anymore. Now, how about social protection? Social protection programs are actually different programs that tries to cover the different risks confronting households in the Philippines. So the different types of social protection programs include social assistance, social insurance, labor market interventions, and social safety nets. We have already several programs that tries to respond to the hunger and malnutrition of children. Of course, the biggest one is the Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino program. It's a conditional cash transfer of around 1,400 pesos to 2,000 pesos per month per household with children 0 to 18 years old. Of course, there are conditionalities on health and education. There's also the supplemental feeding program, 100 days feeding for those in daycare center, for children in the daycare centers, and also for school-based feeding programs also 100 to 120 days for children in elementary school. Then there's the supplemental feeding program is led by the SWD, the school-based feeding program by DepEd, and the National Nutrition Council spearheads the Tutok Kainan program, which is a dietary supplementation focusing on the first 1,000 days, targeting nutritionally at-risk pregnant women and children 6 to 23 months old. Now, what has government done during this current food and energy crisis? As I showed you the first few slides that in recent months we have been experiencing very high inflation, both food and fuel, that also affected transport. So the government provided some top-up targeted cash transfers for the beneficiaries of 4Ps and the social pension. The social pension is for the senior citizens that they receive right now 1,000 pesos per month. So aside from that, the government decided to give a cash transfer, additional 500 pesos per month for 6 months. From June 2022 to December 2022. But aside from the 4Ps and social pension beneficiaries, they also gave to the beneficiaries of the unconditional cash transfer. These were the additional beneficiaries during the train implementation. If you remember the train law, within the law, there's a mandate for government to also provide cash transfers for those who will be affected by the implementation of the train law. And then they added 2.4 million beneficiaries from the listahanan of the SWD. They also gave subsidies to the PUV drivers at 6,500 one-time subsidy because they've been affected by the increase in gasoline prices, fuel prices, and then also 1,000 for trike. There was also a fuel subsidy for farmers and fisherfolk at a one-time 3,000 cash transfer. And of course, there are existing livelihood and cash for work programs by the DSWD, DOLE, and the DTI, which can be accessed by those affected by the food and energy crisis. Now, looking at the response of government, in one of my studies, I made a rapid assessment. And for inclusiveness, there was some issue with regard to the outdated social registries and list of beneficiaries, which they used in giving out the TCT. So because of this, we really don't know whether all those in need actually got the 500 peso per month transfer. These outdated registries also contributed to delayed responses of the government, especially during the COVID-19, where the LGUs were they manually also placed people in the beneficiary list. In terms of adequacy, the government is only able to deliver 3 months worth of the 6 months they promised. So, and if you notice, the amount itself, 500 pesos per month, is actually less than 1,039, which is the result if you multiply the inflation rate, like the 8.6%, times the current monthly poverty threshold, which is 12,082 for a family of five. So in order for a family of five to stay outside of the poverty level, they should have been given 1,039. If not, if only 500, then they have the possibility of falling below the poverty line. Responsiveness and timeliness. It's only the social pension and the 4Ps beneficiaries that have cash cards where the transfer could be easily done. The rest, the government actually used different types of payment systems, and which includes manual cash payouts. The reason also why the government wasn't able to provide the 6 months is because of the narrowed physical space. Our debt to GDP ratio has increased to 60.9% in more recently. And the government has promised to give another 2 months worth of transfer in the first half of 2023. This is according to Secretary Ben Jokno of the Department of Finance. Now, in terms of coordination and coherence of the government response, the social protection programs are just part of a more holistic and comprehensive response that the government can actually take. So this will need a lot of coordination among the different agencies. And as you saw, the government also has various multi-sectoral, multi-agency programs already in place. So this will need a lot of coordination and coherence among the agencies and among the different stakeholders in this campaign against hunger and malnutrition. In fact, also the civil society sector, they have programs that can actually help or already help people beset with hunger and malnutrition. So microfinance has been there. This has been used by households in terms of savings or even getting microinsurance. During COVID-19, we had community pantries and community soup kitchens. A group of NGOs had the project Karinderya. They supported Karinderias, which in turn fed the poorest households in the community. Then you have other hunger project initiated by the Philippine Business Social Progress and the Gawad Kalinga. And even here in Ateneo, we have a center that partners with DepEd in feeding school children. What you see on your screen now is actually a menu of the different programs and policies that the government can actually use to respond to the food and hunger crisis. So you have demand side programs and supply side programs. So for the demand side, you have all those cash transfers. Then you have the cash for work programs, food for work programs. Government can also place price caps on basic goods and commodities. And it can also reduce consumption taxes on basic food items. On the supply side, the government can boost production, food production, by giving out grants and loans for the producers. Also, giving subsidies for insurance. Also, for NGOs, they can do community pantries, soup kitchens. The government can reduce import taxes or liberalize importation of certain commodities. They can also do food rationing and food reserves and food stores, like what is the current government doing through the Kadiwa centers. So as a summary, we know that hunger and malnutrition has been an urgent concern for several years now. And the government, private, and civil society sectors are all aware of this urgent issue. And in fact, they have already devised programs to fight hunger and malnutrition and also to ensure food security. And of course, all of these sectors are aware of the disastrous consequences, especially for poor children, the effect on physical and mental health. And as I was saying a while back, this will affect learning and productivity in the long run. So the learning indicators, for example, are the results of the international exams of our children are very low. In fact, we're probably one of the lowest in ASEAN. And this will for sure affect their productivity once they become working adults. In many studies in economics, nutrition is a key element in expanding and sustaining economic growth. And as we saw in the statistics, there were only gradual improvements in hunger and malnutrition indicators. And of course, this might have even worsened during the pandemic and the now current high food inflation rates. There was also already a multi-sectoral movement, but I think the issue here is the sustainability of these types of movements. Like as I mentioned, the flagship program, it's nowhere to be found in the online. Actually, I've been looking for some clues on what's the current activities of these movements, but I haven't seen one yet. So what is really important, we need stronger coordination and collaboration among stakeholders towards, number one, improved targeting. We already know where the regions where subsistence incidence is high among the regions. Even the Philippine Plan of Action for Nutrition by the NNC already has 38 priority provinces. So we just need to focus on them and find those families and sustain all the efforts. We have a lot of effort, but we have to sustain them. And also, more importantly, the complementation of programs, meaning programs that are related to each other must work together so that the impact will be maximized. And so what is needed, I think we really need the political will and a strong leadership from the government to sustain a coherent and collective response. With the launching of the the Philippine Multisectoral Nutrition Project, I hope that this administration will really have the political will and strong leadership to end hunger and food insecurity. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Aldaban, for the presentation. So Dr. Aldaban provided an overview of the issue of food sustainability and hunger in the Philippines, and also gave the past and the current government programs trying to address these problems. And I think also Dr. Aldaba also provided an overview of some of the institutional and governance issues relating to the implementation of government programs. So thank you very much for the presentation. Our second speaker on the multisectoral approach in national nutrition interventions is Ms. Elaine Soliman, who will tackle the approach being undertaken by the government to address the issue of food sustainability. So more focus, discussion or presentation on the work being done by the national government. Ms. Soliman is also the focal person for nutrition at the Department of Social Welfare and Development, or DSWD. She is a highly motivated and results-oriented individual with experience in project management and community development and strategic planning. She obtained her bachelor's degree in social work from the Honorio Ventura State University and has since worked in various divisions in the DSWD. With a strong passion for professional development, Elaine has also attended numerous training workshops and seminars with regards to community organizing and development. Outside of work, Elaine is an active member of our community and enjoys volunteering her time to various nonprofit organizations, and she is also passionate about travel, music, and reading. So without further ado, Miss Elaine Soliman. Elaine?
Yes, thank you po, Dean, for the introduction. Okay, so I will be presenting po yung food security, social safety nets, and social protection. So let me just give you a brief background po ng PMNP, which is on the next slide. Yes. So with PMNP, we will be implementing it to 235 municipalities all over the Philippines. And the criteria in selecting those municipalities is the high numbers of stunting rate based on the expanded National Nutrition Survey 2019. And so some are wondering, why are we addressing stunting? Kasi Filipinos are often characterized by being short, right, in height and in stature. So based on some studies, there are parents who are short in height but give birth to a taller child due to proper nutrition and upbringing of the child, no? So addressing the stunting problem in the Philippines is important for several reasons. First is stunting has long-term negative effects to a child, no, stunting or the impaired growth and development in children due to poor nutrition can have negative long-term effects on health, education, and earnings potential. And stunted children are more likely to suffer from chronic illnesses, have lower educational attainment, and earn less as adults. Stunting is also linked to poverty. So stunting is often a result of poverty, which makes it particularly prevalent in low-income areas of the Philippines. Addressing stunting can therefore help to reduce poverty and promote economic development. Also, stunting is a sign of poor nutrition. So stunted children are not receiving the nutrients they need for healthy growth and development. So addressing stunting is therefore an important part of improving nutrition in the Philippines. So the Philippines has high rates of stunting according to the latest data of the Philippine National Nutrition Survey. So we have 30.3% of Filipino children under the age of 5 who suffer from stunting. So addressing the issue is crucial for ensuring the health and well-being of future generations. So what is the objective of PMNP, or the Philippine Multi-Sectoral Nutrition Project? So the objective will be to increase the simultaneous utilization of a package of nutrition-specific and nutrition-sensitive interventions and improve key behaviors and practices known to reduce stunting in target LGUs. So why do we have nutrition-specific and nutrition-sensitive interventions? What are the difference between the two? No? Nutrition-specific interventions are interventions that directly target the immediate causes of undernutrition and address the need for specific nutrients. Examples of nutrition-specific interventions include the provision of nutrient supplements such as vitamin A, iron or zinc, and then treatment of acute malnutrition and the promotion of exclusive breastfeeding. On the other hand, nutrition-sensitive interventions are interventions that address the underlying determinants of undernutrition, such as poverty, poor access to healthcare, and inadequate water and sanitation infrastructure. So nutrition-sensitive interventions work to create an enabling environment for good nutrition and may include improving access to education, promoting gender equality, and increasing access to safe drinking water and sanitation facilities. So we have three components for the PMNP. We have the component one, which is to strengthen delivery of nutrition and primary health services. So DOH is spearheading this component one. They will be the lead for the nutrition-specific interventions. And under that, we have the primary healthcare services supporting, including primary healthcare services support, including social behavior change communication, health and nutrition services systems strengthening, including LGU mobilization, harmonization of information system for convergence. And also, they will be providing technical assistance to BARM in 40 municipalities. And we have the component two, which is the community-based nutrition service delivery and multi-sectoral nutrition convergence. So under component two, we have the increased access to and use of clean water, appropriate sanitation, and improved hygiene or WASH practices. We also have the access to early childhood care and development or ACCD services, and decreasing access of Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino program or 4Ps beneficiaries to nutrition programs and services. So DSWD will be spearheading this component two. And component three is a joint collaboration of DOH and DSWD. So we have the institutional strengthening, project management, and monitoring and evaluation for the component three. Okay, next slide. Okay, so promoting food security is challenging, particularly in developing countries or regions affected by natural disasters or conflicts. Here are some of the challenges in promoting food security and some ways to overcome them. So we have the first, the insufficient income and resources. So this is one of the challenges that we are facing in promoting food security. So many people lack the financial resources, as we all know, to purchase the food they need. And to address this challenge, governments and aid organizations can establish food assistance programs, providing aid or subsidies to those in need. And then we have the inadequate infrastructure. Poor and insufficient infrastructure can limit the availability and affordability of food. So governments can work to improve road networks, storage facilities, and transportation systems to help support the production and distribution of food. We also have the climate change. Climate change is impacting agriculture as extreme weather events, such as droughts and floods, reduce crop yields. So governments and organizations should encourage sustainable agriculture and provide support for farmers through subsidies and training. We also have the conflict as one of the challenges. So political instability and conflict can lead to the displacement of people, disrupting food production and distribution. Governments and aid organizations should prioritize food assistance in conflict zones, establish safe zones for refugees, and provide support for farmers and agricultural agriculture workers affected by conflict. We also have the food waste. So food waste not only waste valuable resources, but also contributes to food insecurity, encouraging responsible consumption behavior and creating programs to redistribute excess food can help reduce food waste and increase food access. We also have the lack of education. So lack of education on proper nutrition can lead to preventable illnesses and malnutrition. Implementing education programs at the grassroots can help in the grassroots level, can help individuals make informed dietary choices. So promoting food security requires a coordinated effort between government, aid organizations, and communities. And by addressing these challenges and implementing solutions, progress can be made towards a world where everyone has access to sufficient and nutritious food. Next slide, please.
Yes, it's
Okay,
already
so
shown. Go ahead.
yeah, so the Philippine Multi-Sectoral Nutrition Project, or PMNP, provides valuable learnings on multi-sectoral collaboration for nutrition-related policy and program management. So the following are among the few key insights. First is collaboration is necessary to achieve nutrition goals. So PMNP's multi-sectoral approach demonstrates that government, civil society organizations, and other stakeholders need to work together to address nutrition-related issues. This approach acknowledges that nutrition is an intersectional problem that requires a holistic and integrated approach. Next is partnerships facilitate implementation and sustainability. PMNP shows that partnerships between stakeholders can facilitate implementation of nutrition programs and policies. Partnerships also foster sustainability by ensuring that programs and policies are supported and maintained over time. Next is the community involvement and ownership is vital. So with PMNP under the Kalahi Seeds, we are implementing our sub-projects through CDD approach, community-driven development approach. So we are really giving power to the community, and then for them to be able to own whatever projects they would like to implement on their community. So PMNP emphasizes the importance of community involvement and ownership in the development and implementation of nutrition programs. Community ownership helps ensure that programs address the specific needs of the community and are culturally appropriate. Next is the evidence-based programming increases effectiveness. So PMNP's use of evidence-based programming demonstrates that nutrition programs that are based on scientific research and validated approaches are more effective. This approach increases the likelihood of achieving desired outcomes and can provide data to support the sustainability of the programs. Next is the gender sensitivity is essential. So
Hi,
PMNP recognizes that gender dynamics have a significant impact on nutrition outcomes. Multi-sectoral collaboration should involve gender-sensitive programming efforts that recognize and respond to gender inequalities. So overall, the PMNP provides a valuable example of how multi-sectoral collaboration can be leveraged to address nutrition-related challenges. The project highlights the importance of partnerships and community involvement and evidence-based programming in achieving sustainable nutrition outcomes. Okay, next slide po. Thank you. So, strengthening social protection mechanisms can play a critical role in addressing undernutrition and malnutrition among children. Here are some insights on how social protection mechanisms can be strengthened to reduce undernutrition and malnutrition among children. Okay, number one is targeted interventions can improve the effectiveness of social protection. So social protection mechanisms that are better targeted towards vulnerable populations can help to reduce the prevalence of undernutrition and malnutrition among children. By providing targeted support such as cash transfers, food vouchers, or assistance to pregnant mothers and children in the critical first 1,000 days of life, social protection interventions can ensure that the right people are receiving the right support. Next is the multi-sectoral collaboration can enhance the impact of social protection mechanisms. So strengthening partnerships between social protection programs and other sectors, such as agriculture, health, and education, can enhance the impact of social protection mechanisms. For example, by investing in agriculture programs that increase the production of nutrient-rich foods, health programs that improve child feeding practices, and nutrition education initiatives can improve food security and nutrition outcomes. Okay, next is investing in nutrition-sensitive programs. Nutrition-sensitive social protection programs not only address poverty, but also work to improve nutrition outcomes by targeting the underlying factors that contribute to undernutrition and malnutrition. For example, nutrition-sensitive social protection mechanisms that focus on improving maternal health and childcare behaviors, family planning, and promotion of exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months of life can contribute to reducing the prevalence of undernutrition and malnutrition among children. And we also have the monitor and evaluate for effectiveness. So monitoring and evaluating social protection mechanisms can support evidence-based decision-making and ensure that program objectives are being met. This may include collecting nutrition-specific indicators such as weight and height in children, or conducting qualitative assessments of program impact. A system of feedback and learning can help programs become more effective and adaptive. Through strengthening social protection mechanisms, it is possible to reduce undernutrition and malnutrition among children by targeting interventions, collaborating across sectors, investing in nutrition-sensitive programs, and monitoring and evaluating impact. Social protection mechanisms can become more effective, sustainable, and lead to better health outcomes for children. So the PMNP's multi-sectoral approach, which involves coordination and collaboration among multiple stakeholders, can help strengthen the social protection system by bringing together different agencies and organizations to address the underlying determinants of malnutrition, such as poverty and inadequate access to health and social services. Through this approach, the project can help build a more cohesive and inclusive social protection system that promotes equity, social inclusion, and economic development for all Filipinos. Next slide. Okay. So that's it po for my presentation for the.
Okay, thank you, Elaine, for your presentation highlighting the Philippine Multisectoral Nutrition Program as something that addresses one of the issues that has been raised previously in the presentation of Nandi, of the need for greater coordination and linkages between communities and also the government in addressing these programs.
Yeah.
Our last but not the least speaker will discuss the successful practices of local government units in nutrition programs is Georgina Ann Hernandez-Yang. Ms. Hernandez-Yang, or Joanne, is the Executive Director of the Galing Po Foundation, an organization that promotes innovation and excellence in local governance. Prior to her appointment, she served as the Vice Presidential Spokesperson and head of Angat Buhay, the flagship anti-poverty program of the 14th Vice President. She also joined the Department of Social Welfare and Development as Director of Sustainable Livelihood Program and also worked in the academe as a research program manager at the Bloomberg Harvard City Leadership Initiative and is currently a member of the Ateneo de Manila Loyola School's faculty. She graduated with a degree of AB in Interdisciplinary Studies and Master's in Science in Social Development from the Ateneo de Manila and completed her mid-career Master's in Public Administration at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Joanne?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So I think I'm the last speaker and I hope I wouldn't take so much time. I would want to share the screen from my end, if possible.
Yes, go ahead. I think you're being now made co-host. Xavier?
And siguro while waiting for that. So Galing Po Foundation, we're a non-profit and we recognize innovative and effective and empowering local governance programs. And I will be presenting 3 examples for today in line with our topic on the SDG 2. So these are LG best practices on food security and nutrition. So we launched this awards program in 1993. So we're currently on our 30th year, no? And more than 300 programs from more than 200 LGUs have been recognized, many of which are related to food security, nutrition, health, and agriculture, which we think all relates to the attainment of SDG 2. The 3 models that I'll be presenting, if you notice, is one represents a city, a highly urbanized city. Another represents a municipality. And then the third one represents a barangay. Also recognized in the chat that the challenge really is scaling up and replication of these best practices. But first, parang let's hear this out, no? Let's learn from these best practices and then discuss how might we be able to support one another, national government, civil society, academe, and local government working together to scale up and replicate these best practices that we've seen both from LGUs and civil society alike. And of course, before the next slide will be presenting a short video about Grow QC, but a shout out and a recognition I've seen in the participants. We have one from QC Sustainable Development Affairs Unit. So the Grow QC program was actually implemented by QC SDAO. So led by Mayor Joy and also by Sir Nonong Velasco. So we'll play the video first and then proceed with the discussion.
Okay, I think we just wait a while. The video will be loaded. Okay.
Quezon City. Ako po si Mayor Joy Belmonte at ito ang aming kwentong galing po.
Sinong mag-aakala na sa isang lungsod na napapalibutan ng mga aspaltong kalsada, umusbong ang mga pananim na nagbigay ng pagkain sa marami sa panahon ng pandemya? Tama ang inyong narinig. Sa lungsod ng Quezon, sa kalikasan namuhunan ang lokal na pamahalaan para masolusyonan ang kawalan ng trabaho at sapat na pagkain nitong pandemya.
Matagal na po ang programa ng urban agriculture na sinimulan ng lungsod. Higit 10 taon na ang nakalipas. Nakita natin ang kahalagahan ng pagpaparami ng ating mga green spaces at lalo na ang pagkakaroon ng madaling mapagkukuhanan ng pagkain sa ating mga sariling bakuran. Pinabuti natin ito. Hindi na lamang tayo umaasa sa pag-angkat mula sa ibang probinsya, kundi ating pinapalakas ang food systems ng lungsod upang maging food resilient at sustainable tayo. Ang katatagan mismo ng ating Q-citizens, ang mga urban farmers ng lungsod, ang patuloy na inspirasyon sa pagpapatibay ng ating Grow QC program.
Abril 2020 nang magpasa ng resolusyon tungkol sa pagbibigay ng tax incentive sa mga bakanting lupa na gagamitin bilang urban farms. Kasunod dito ay ang pamimigay ng lokal na pamahalaan ng mga binhi. Kaya naman, ang mga nawalan ng trabaho at kabuhayan naingganyong lumahok sa proyekto.
Ito na rin na kasi minsan kumukuha ng, yun nga, sustain na pang-ulam, ganyan. Tapos, na-encourage ako sa kanila, lalo na sa mga nanay na nanakdo na nga sila. Tipo, sige sila magtanim.
Ang programa nagsimula lamang sa 166 na urban farms and gardens. Mula riyan, halos doble na ang naging bilang nito at umabot na ngayon sa 324 urban farms and gardens sa 94 na mga barangay sa lungsod. 10 sa mga ito tinuturing bilang community model farms. Katumbas yan ng 1.77 milyong masustansyang pagkain na naihatid sa hapagkainan ng bawat pamilyang taga Quezon City sa pamamagitan ng community feeding program sa gitna ng pandemya. Dahil dyan, kinikilala na ngayon ang Quezon City bilang siyang may pinakamalaking taniman sa gitna ng lungsod.
Sabi nga po namin, halaman na ng pagmamahalan ito dahil dito po nabuo ang napakagandang samahan ng bawat grupong ito.
Ang Grow QC ay patunay na sa anumang panahon sa pagtutulungan ng pamahalaan at mamamayan, busog, malusog at kasama sa pag-unlad ang lahat. Ikaw, anong kwentong galing pook mo?
So I think that really explains the basic gist of Grow QC. But in terms of looking closer into this model, highly urbanized city, what you can see on screen that we've adopted from the presentation of Quezon City during the awards in 2021 is we see here a structure led by the mayor. So leadership at that highest level, the local chief executive level, is important to make such an initiative work. And then having Mayor Joy refers to it more of like as a flat structure, like a task force and that na may kumukumpas, or in this case, it's really the co-chairperson for the Food Security Task Force, which is the Sustainable Development Affairs Unit. I think also quite unique that Quezon City has a specific office related, really focused on the SDGs or Sustainable Development Affairs. And it's integrated into its local economic activities, yung LAPO and small business support, as well as their parks and environment. So all the different sectors are represented, including CSOs, farmers organizations, and agribusiness sector. So really yung importance of structure is something that we need to emphasize. And then a structure that has a clear system that it will implement. It may be complex, but when we're able to see it in a framework or a system like this, so a circular food system, basically linking yung production of the urban farms from vegetable nurseries to the model farms where the training is conducted, and even doing aquaculture, they're now scaling up and doing their aquaponics and hydroponics. The joy of urban farming started way beyond the even before the pandemic started, but they scaled it up during the pandemic because of the need for local food sourcing. And even now, when the lockdowns are over, the urban farms are actually still thriving. And the last time that we visited this was a few weeks ago with a group, Bridge Institute from the UK, and tuloy-tuloy expanding yung mga aquaponics and hydroponics project, and it's linked to the feeding program. When we heard in the earlier discussion ni Dr. Aldaba yung EPAP, or Expanded Partnerships Against Hunger and Poverty, the concept of that really is linking local farm producers into the supply chain of feeding programs and even disaster response, which we've seen in this model. Yung agri overlay zone, they were really able to identify the lands, unutilized lands, and through use of rock agreements and MOA, they were able to access these unutilized lands and even develop yung food processing zones and the food trade. So it's an innovation in a sense because it looks at old solutions but in new ways through the transformation of idle lands, the creation of a task force, and the focus on development of a circular economy. And here on screen, you could see some of the visuals for the project. And in terms of the way forward, it's really institutionalizing the office so that it is sustained. It already has an ordinance and an executive order. In fact, the Department of Interior Local Government has adopted Grow QC as a national program to be replicated in all highly urbanized cities. So they launched it already. The Secretary of Interior Local Government with Mayor Joy launched this already as a national program, which is really part of the advocacy of Galing Pook. When we recognize these LG best practices, the next step is to really find ways for national government to support and adopt it for replication and scaling up, including stronger collaboration with the academe. So in this case, a learning center, an urban farming innovation center with QC University. I think I was only given 15 minutes and I'll try to keep with the time. So the second model is the municipality. So in the north, Pidig, Ilocos Norte, this one in 2022. Here, I think what I'd like to, there's too much going on the slide, but what I'd like to focus on is the social protection aspect. So while there is support for the agriculture side, yung farm production systems, we see here meron ding aspects on providing crop insurance, organizing them into cooperatives so that they're able to access complementary programs and services needed for a agriculture program to survive. Usually kasi it's really implemented in silos. Yung agriculture program does not really connect as much with the social welfare development program, but that's very much part and parcel yung success of the agriculture if there's enough social safety nets and social protection, especially in disaster prone areas, especially in areas where flooding is very common. So nakikita rin natin dito yung backward and forward integration so that there is more value captured in the supply chain by the smallholder farmers. The model here that was adopted by the local government is as a public-private partnership between the local government unit of Pidig, the municipality in Ilocos Norte, and the Pidig Basi Multipurpose Cooperative. And related also to ensuring that there is a holistic approach to assisting the farmers, there's the social safety net connected to the project, which is yung Pidig Cares 24/7, which is a health program. And because we know that a lot of the smallholder farmers is really just one illness or one disaster away from not being able to pursue the sustainability of their food production and enterprises. And this one, they turned the problem into a solution. The problem on flooding is and the problem on lack of water. They found one solution for two seemingly different problems, which is the small water impounding dam. So it was more than a decade ago when the mayor approached the DPWH to support the quote-unquote irrigation program. It was quite creative kasi the DPWH doesn't necessarily support an irrigation program, but it was pitched as a flood control program, which was also valid. So they were able to have better access to sustainable water supply through the small water impounding dams and address din yung kanilang flood control. So yung resilience din to flooding was improved, yung vulnerabilities was reduced. And the last one is yung from black to green. This is a barangay level model. So it's in Barangay Cayabu, Tanay Rizal. From black to green because the main source of livelihood in this community used to be yung pag-uuling, as you see on the screen. And based on the intervention, they developed the ecotourism site. And for it to be a viable ecotourism site, no, they had to stop yung pag-uuling and transformed it into farming and fisheries, particularly yung mga aquaculture that you see on the screen, itong mga fish ponds. And they even presented itong yung yield from both the fish ponds and the farming. It's a small community, kaya nga ang laki ng range, no, from Quezon City, a highly urbanized city, huge population, to a barangay. Barangay Cayabu only has a population of about 3,000 individuals. But last week, the barangay team of Barangay Cayabu presented their program to those who are undertaking the Career Executive Service Board, which is also our way of educating the career public officials in national government. They had there the DA, the DepEd, the DILG, even SEC and Bureau of Customs. Those are undertaking yung kanilang CES. Underwent itong 2-day immersion program sa Barangay Cayabu, which again is a concrete way of advocating, lobbying, and promoting these best practices for scaling up and replication. We also, in Galing po, are working very closely with the DSWD through Secretary Rex Gatchalian to develop replication manuals out of these LG best practices because coming from local government himself, now a cabinet secretary, he knows that the best way to really implement these programs is by getting the models from the LGUs themselves. So we're doing these replication manuals and it will be introduced to all of the LGUs so that we could search for the most effective, most promising, locally led LGU CSO implemented na mga programs addressing the SDG 2 to zero hunger. Last two slides, kumbaga abstracting all the lessons from the different best practices. We only presented 3, but we have a lot more that we can share, even from earlier years. But basically, we're seeing different factors, no, influencing yung food security and nutrition, the institutional and political environment, including the buy-in at the highest level of leadership, and then the production, access to assets, inputs to ensure to improve the productivity both of the community members and even of the natural assets that are available that are closely linked with social protection and social risk management initiatives to ensure the holistic poverty and development. But even with these policies, institutions, and processes in place, there's really a huge part on social behavioral change communication. So for example, there's access to nutritious food like kamote instead of rice, but there's that mindset on choosing rice over kamote, even among halimbawa lactating mothers choosing formula over breast milk. So it's in the mindset, the culture of people, for whatever reason, iba-iba yung perspectives. And that's why yung importance ng first 1,000 days is really also on helping communities and members of the community to make the right decisions. But alongside that is really ensuring availability, accessibility, including the price, and the stability, as well as influencing yung consumption patterns. And so part of the learnings in terms of LGU social welfare, development, leadership, and governance is to ensure that we have properly trained personnel, and we couldn't emphasize that enough because they're the ones that actually lead at the front lines. And then having interoperable information systems for data-driven planning. So we cannot really prioritize communities without information on where different interventions are most needed. And also ensuring that there are resilient and disaster-proof initiatives, all leading towards improving access to healthcare and nutrition programs, access to assets and inclusive supply chains, and also access to nutritious sources of food. And all of these are equally important in ensuring zeroing hunger. So that's the end point of the presentation. We'd be happy to also hear your comments and questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Joanne, for presenting the three models. No, looks like they're replicable models of LGU programs in terms of food sustainability, and also highlighting the institutional and governance aspects of these models as well. So I think I'm sure that we will have a lot of discussion about this in a while. Lastly, thank you again, John. Lastly, providing the reactions to the presentations are Mr. Elvin Uy, who is the Executive Director of the Philippine Business for Social Progress, the country's largest business-led NGO, which is at the nexus of corporate citizenship, sustainable development, and poverty reduction, and Ms. Veronica F. Obat, one of the implementers of the Parent Teaching Other Parents program of the Davao City Social Welfare Development Office. Elvin is a former Assistant Secretary and K-12 Program Coordinator of the Department of Education and after his stints in the public sector. Elvin did product management, business development, strategic management in various industries. He's the recipient of the 2017 Carnegie Mellon University Outstanding Recent Alumni Award and ranked first in the 2005 Electronics and Communications Engineering Licensure Examination. He has a master's in public policy and management, the highest distinction from Carnegie Mellon University in Australia, and as an Australia Award Scholar and an electronics communication engineering degree, magna cum laude from the De La Salle University. While Veronica finished her degree in education at the College of Teacher Education in Davao and is a community facilitator at the St. Jude Thaddeus Shrine Parish and a president of the Barangay Council for Women, both in Davao. She's also a Pantawid Pamilyang Filipino parent leader or 4-piece parent leader. She's an implementer of the Parent Teaching Other Parents, a program which aims to answer the needs of barangays where child development centers are unavailable. And she's also handling the supplemental feeding program in 3 barangays. So without further ado, let's hear the reactions from Elvin and Veronica. Elvin? If you want to go first.
Thank you, Prof. Randy, for the generous introduction. Let me first say that we are living in a world of what you call poly-crisis. Maraming crisis sa buong mundo at sa ating bansa. May krisis sa kalusugan, may krisis sa presyo, pagkain, trabaho, ekonomiya, may krisis sa edukasyon at learning. Gusto kong ibalik yung usapan sa mga may hirap. Philippine Business for Social Progress was founded December 1970 by 50 of the most important business leaders at that time in the country for the business community to address poverty. Narinig natin to kay Prof. Nandi, kay Joanne, kay Elaine, yung iba't ibang mga programa. Pero ano ba yung mukha ng kahirapan sa ngayon? According to the...
Yeah, sorry. We have a few members of the audience who are from abroad, so if you can also provide an English translation to what you said.
I will. Yes. Don't worry. I will. So, yes. So going back, so for now, the Philippine poverty picture is this. Pre-pandemic 2018, we had 17.67 million poor Filipinos nationwide. That's about 16.7% of the population. 1 in every 6 Filipino was considered poor or living below the poverty threshold. In 2021, PSA now has that number at 19.99 million Filipinos, 18.1% of the population, closer to 1 in every 5. That 2.32 million increase in the number of poor Filipinos is equivalent to the combined population of the cities of Manila and Makati. Or if you prefer a less imperial example, that's more than half of the total population of the Bangsamoro region. Now, looking at another government data the listahanan data of the SWD. Started pre-pandemic, completed 2021, finally released last year. 67 million Filipinos were included in the survey or study. 30.4 million of them lived in poor households, about 2 in every 5. That's the picture of poverty in the Philippines. That's what polycrisis means. Being poor means having no or very low safety net. You are one shot away from financial, economic, physical, emotional health ruin. And I'm not trying to say that the sky is falling, but literally for the poor, tomorrow is not assured. And what we've heard this afternoon from our colleagues in academia, in government, in CSO, civil society, they're giving us a different viewpoints, different programs, different experiences. All of those we should support and we should amplify and we should complement. But let me also continue to sound the alarm. The Sustainable Development Goals or Global Goals commitment, including no extreme poverty as goal number 1, is 7 years away. We were nowhere near hitting it before the pandemic, not just as Philippines, but globally. Now we are even further away from it with less time. Literally, we have to rally and to find ways to leapfrog because we have less time, less resources also. Not all sectors have recovered from the pandemic. Scarring is real, especially for the vulnerable and marginalized. Scarring is real even for the development sector. Local NGOs and CSOs here have not rebounded. So it's a clarion call for all of us, whether we're working at the national, but especially if we are embedded at the local levels, whether we're in academia, we're in local government, national government, we're in the private sector, we're in the civil society space. All of us have a crucial role to play on food security, on nutrition, on climate change adaptation and mitigation, on disaster preparedness and risk reduction. And we have to think of innovative ways. Joanne gave us some examples at the local level. Prof. Nandi is telling us these are the big trends that we have to respond to. And Elaine and the SWD are trying their best with external resources and funding through the PMNP. That's all of those are laudable, but we have to increase our response 3, 4, 5-fold, if not even more. Time is running out, and we really have to literally do the dirty work in the next few months and years ahead. And for us at PBSP, for a lot of you in this audience, my final message also in reaction is it's easy to feel like nothing would address the scale and the complexity of these crises. And that's true most days, no? That's true most days. And it's also okay. If we feel that way, it's also okay. The work that we do, as scholars would say, that's high emotional intelligence work. It takes a lot from us emotionally, apart from physically, intellectually, also, maybe spiritually. But when we dust ourselves off, we just continue because it's work that matters, and it's work that all Filipinos, especially those at the margins, will need. So yun lamang po. And if you have questions later, I hope I can give a few other answers, including what I said at the chat earlier. Salamat.
Okay, thank you, Elvin. I mean, that's a clarion call. I need to do really more. I mean, despite what we really have. So let's go now to Veronica for her reactions.
Hi po.
Hi.
Magandang hapon po sa lahat.
Hapon.
So, ako po sa CSWDO, so hindi po talaga ako ang nag-handle ng supplementary feeding program po namin. So, kaya lang sa ngayon po ay nandun po sila sa evaluation po. So, ako ang pumalit para maging kinatawan ng CSWDO. So, ako po ay ah, magkahalong nalulungkot at natutuwa po sa aking inatinan ngayon regarding sa food shortage po sa Pilipinas po. Parang naisip ko na napakaraming programa pero parang hindi pa rin po sapat. Kagaya ng sabi ni Sir Oy. So, sa amin po dito sa CSWDO, ngayon po ay nasa ika-12 cycle na po kami ng supplementary feeding program po namin. So ito po ay matatapos ngayong buwan ng Hunyo. So sa amin pong opisina, ito po ay binibigay doon po sa mga child development centers po. At ang nagbi-benefit po nito ay yun pong mga batang nasa edad 3 hanggang 4 na taong gulang po. In my part po, ako po ay nasa isang modality po ng ECCD, which is the parent teaching other parents how to teach their own children po. Ito po ay naglalayong tumugon doon po sa mga lugar na wala pong daycare centers. So ako po ang pumupunta doon, ginagather ko po yung mga parents po, at sila yung tinuturuan ko. So kami din po ay kasali po sa programa ng supplementary feeding program po. At ako po ay natutuwa doon po sa akin pong nakita na maraming mga example po kagaya noon pong sa Galingpok at saka yung sa Quezon City kanina po regarding doon sa parang urban container gardening po. Yun po ay talagang makakatulong po with regards to dito po sa feeding namin. Actually, ngayon po ay meron na po kaming gulayan sa daycare center wherein yung mga daycare centers po namin ay sinasabihan po namin na magtanim sila ng gulay kasi hindi po naman po lahat so yung mga gulay na kulang po kalimitan yung mga parents po yung nag-augment or counterpart po nila. So instead may mga daycare centers po kami na meron na silang sariling gulay po sa kanila, so yun nagagamit po nila. At saka sa programa po din namin, amin po ini-enhance din po yung magkaroon po ng sariling gulayan din po yung mga parents po. Kaya lang kung dito po sa city ay nagiging parang challenge po yung urban container gardening po kasi po kulang din po sa edukasyon yung mga sa kahirapan po, tsaka sa mga parents po sa mga daycare, kalimitan naghahanap buhay din po sila. Hindi din po nila ma-address yung nandun sila sa bahay, magtanim. Kalimitan nandun din po sila sa labas naghahanap buhay. So, kami po ay talaga pong naghahanap ng pwede pa pong ma-augment o magawa para po ma-address po ang ating problema po regarding sa gutom. So, pero ginagawa naman po lahat ng gobyerno. So, sabi nga doon sa napakaraming programs kanina, mayroong nag-chat sa chat box na para atang na focus po yung natin, yung mga programs natin doon sa pagbibigay ng isda kaysa doon sa kung paano po maturuan yung mga mahirap kung paano po mangisda. Pero sabi nga ni Sir, time is running out. Sana po magkaroon pa ng mga programa sa po na yun po bang kaya po i-achieve po ng mga mahihirap kasi talagang kailangan na po natin ngayon. So yun lang po na masabi ko. Sana po ay nakapag-share ako ng may kabuluhan po sa inyo. Pasensya na po kayo. Maraming magandang hapon po.
Sige, maraming salamat, Veronica. No? So I think napakalalim ng inyong binagi. But let me just translate what you said to our international audience. So Veronica said that there are many efforts that are being undertaken by community groups to address their food sustainability problem, developing vegetable gardens, urban containers. But given that maybe the challenge really for those implementing food sustainability programs is not only to provide these products or the food to beneficiaries, but also at the same time to teach them to become more sustainable, no, for them to themselves, no, to address their own problems and issues. No? So I guess that's also the challenge that what I think what also Dr. Aldaba Nandi said also earlier, no, how do we think about, and also pointed out, no, in the chat earlier, how do we make sure, no, that these programs are sustainable and have really a strong impact on the lives of those who are benefiting, no, from the programs. No? So I think because of that, maybe we can now open the floor, no, to the Zoom room, no, for questions, no, coming from the audience. No, maybe I can start, no, by asking some of the questions that were actually forwarded to us, no, before the webinar. No? So one, I think, just linking the question first to what Veronica said. No? So and maybe also our, not only our speakers, no, we can answer, but also our reactors. No? How do we see the impacts of the lack of food availability on different sectors of society, no, including mothers, children, indigenous peoples, urban populations, no, and others? I know that maybe this is a question that Nandi should have answered, but maybe some of our speakers and the actors could also address this question also as well. May nakikita ba tayo, or parang do we see this this issue of food sustainability and social protection also affecting, no, the most marginalized groups like the indigenous? Anyone? Sige, sure.
Yeah, at least based on the local models that we have seen, it really is a mix of access to it's basic. The goal is access to sustainable access to nutritious food, and part of that is through accessing it from the market, ensuring its affordability, so the efficiency of the food supply chains, but also growing your own food, and in a lot of the geographically isolated disadvantaged communities, and also in the upland communities, in the coastal communities, there really has to be more support in capacity building, but also with the right inputs. Usually, kasi sometimes, for example, it could be government, it could be NGO. There's a tendency na, we can only give training, but we don't have the necessary funds to start to help them start it up. So minsan it ends with just training. So then there's human capital development through the skills training, but they're really not able to realize the full potential of being able to grow their own food. Kasi yung pumunta na partner can only provide the training. So hopefully there really could be more linking, collaboration across sectors. So if one group can give the training, then we should be able to link to other groups that will be able to build the physical infrastructure and also provide the rest of the necessary inputs and financial capital needed for that.
Okay, thank you, Joan. So in a sense, now trying to link also the programs that one is undertaking to others. No? And I think that answer leads to the some of the questions that are raised in the Zoom. No? So what is really the sustainability, no, of all of these programs? And I guess maybe that's also a question that Elvin may want to answer. No, I think he said that Nandi raised this issue of where is the Kain Tayo program now? No? So how do we see, how can maybe programs be made sustainable, and also linked to the question to PM, the question that some of the Zoom participants asked, is the PMNP program actually also sustainable also as well? No? So maybe Elvin, you might want to answer the question of where now the Kain Tayo program, or
before the Kain Tayo one, let me answer the question more broadly about sustainability. Let me highlight the poverty story of the Philippines. In November last year, some of you, or a lot of us, may have read this. The World Bank released the poverty and inequality study for the Philippines, where it looked at 3 decades worth of poverty and inequality in the Philippines, from the tail end of the Marcos Sr. regime, where poverty was nearly half of the population, to where it was pre and post-pandemic at 16.7 and 18.1% respectively. So from a poverty standpoint, looking at 3 decades worth of progress, we made substantial dents against poverty. Literally, we more than reduced it by half in 3 decades. Good story, diba? Inequality, however, was persistently high and was only beginning to go down pre-pandemic, but shot up again because of the pandemic. In nutrition, ganun din. If you look at data dating back to the 80s, the level of stunting, wasting have been persistently high since then. So even if poverty has been going down through the past 3 decades, we have not made similar progress on the nutrition story for our young Filipinos ages 4 or younger. Now, when we looked at it as a sector and as an organization, we said, how can we make a dent? So during the last administration, because of Pilipinas Contra Gutom, former Cabsec Nograles, and the response of the private sector, Kain Tayo Pilipinas was born. Now, I guess this is public enough now, but let me just say what happened to it. So it required a DSWD, public solicitation permit, because we were trying to raise funds from the public. We got the permit after more than a year. And the program died a natural death because Cabsec Nograles moved on to the Civil Service Commission. And the private sector partners lost patience and appetite with what happened with our DSWD permit. We're still doing the work, PBSP. So Kain Tayo and Pilipinas Contra Gutom were just one of or two of many efforts that we do on hunger and nutrition. And I think that's why it's very important that governments, national, local, TSOs, NGOs, academia, while the personalities will change, not just government where it happens, but even across our organizations. While personalities and individuals will change, will transition, institutions have to make that commitment because it is possible. The poverty story of the country shows we can make a dent, but the nutrition story of the country also similarly shows that even when things get better economically, better human development outcomes are not assured. Kailangan po siyang paghirapan. And we have to coordinate on the dirty and difficult work, especially at the local level.
Okay, thank you, Elvin. I don't know if Elaine, maybe you might also want to address the question of what lessons can we learn from previous programs so that we can make the PMNP program be made more sustainable. Meron bang para nakikita ng what does DSWD see as very critical now to make sure that maybe the program can last beyond this administration? Sige.
Yes, hello. So, I have already answered the question on the chat box. So, the lessons learned for the okay, so the PMNP has learned several lessons from other nutrition programs implemented by various government agencies in order to improve its outcomes and impact. So these lessons include the importance of evidence-based interventions, the need for a multi-sectoral approach, and the value of partnerships, and also the importance of monitoring and evaluation. So the overall, the PMNP has learned that a multi-sectoral, evidence-based, and partnership-driven approach with a strong focus on monitoring and evaluation is essential in improving outcomes and impact for nutrition programs.
Okay, so in a sense, what you said, no, is that I mean, there's some knowledge now that has been already made with this past programs, no, and maybe I don't know, maybe Joan or Elvin or Veronica, we can think, how do we? I think in the presentation of Nandi, the question also is that there are a lot of these LGU initiatives already, government initiatives at maraming mga nangyayari sa mga community organizations. So there are many activities undertaken by these many community organizations. But how can these programs become more integrated? No, yung challenge yata is the entire program wanted to develop a sort of a map, no? So at least there can be some mapping of efforts. But how do we, with many of these small programs, or well, maybe now large one by the DSWD, how can the programs that are being undertaken converge more, with one another, so that the impact of these programs can be strengthened?
Prof. Randy, can I make a quick point? Still on PMNP, because I think it's very important. For the benefit of our audience, I don't know if this was highlighted earlier, PMNP is a $178 million loan from the World Bank to the Philippine government. It was actually signed by Secretary Dominguez, but only approved, implemented starting with the current Marcos administration. Loan po siya, inutang natin siya over the next 4 years. Sa akin, the opportunity with PMNP, can we crowd in other investments from private sector, development sector, as government invests in the area of food security and nutrition? And I think what Elaine shared on chat and during her presentation, having that multi-sectoral collaboration platform, it's about literally, for example, PMNP, 235 municipalities, 5,900 plus barangays. Ang tanong sa atin, sa private sector, development sector, do we also go there or do we cover the other areas? During the time of Cabset Nograles, Pilipinas Contra Gutom said, we'll invest outside of PMNP. Kasi marami pang nutrition hotspots other than those hotspots identified in the loan. So that's an ongoing conversation, but that's exactly what we're trying to do now. Government is putting its resources and the resources of the World Bank to a clear development priority. The response or the question to private sector and to NGOs is, what will be our equivalent co-investment, diba? And how can we sustain it? My hope and my aspiration, because I am part of Philippine Business for Social Progress, can we do something now with the PMNP, both government and the international development side, that we can begin, we can amplify, we can complement, and then even after the $178 million loan is finished in 4 years, we can sustain the gains, because we're not just looking at 2027, we're looking at 2030 and beyond. And we're looking at the 2 in every 5 Filipinos who are part of poor households who will continue to suffer from food insecurity and nutrition deficits.
Thank you, Elvin. And John?
I think in terms of scaling, it may sound counterintuitive to say that let the local coalitions and groups lead the scale up. But a lot of talk on convergence at the national government has, kumbaga, quote-unquote, failed. Kasi it's so far from the action. It's far from the ground. And I think national and subnational structures and institutions would be able to support information as a hub, as resource sharing, guidance, but especially with the full devolution, the local government code is there. Actually, this is really within the mandate addressing your SDG2, hunger, food security, social service is really within the mandate of local governments. And I think the skills that need to be built there is really the ability to mobilize resources across different sectors, not just from the public sector, but be able to mobilize effectively the private sector, the civil society, the academe. So we do have a project yung local coalition building called CoLab Dev on data-driven development. It builds a local coalition with grassroots people's organizations and CSOs with the state universities and colleges and the LGUs. And I think this might be a possible model for creating those hubs for resource and information sharing. But I think there has to be a mechanism of aggregating or parang throwing the information up for the benefit of those who want to know where to help and what help is needed. And then that I think would be a value add of the national government, DOH, DSWD leading the PNMP. I think is really in a good position to do so. But oftentimes the challenge is if national government has that deliverable to also produce the outputs. Parang it contradicts sometimes with the which one to prioritize, to be a coordinating body or to be an implementing body. And hopefully things could be made more efficient and we could have better use of resources if there are less overlaps and clearer institutional arrangements across sectors.
Yeah, thank you. I think you both pointed out the issue really, I mean, of the institutional arrangements that are needed to really make a dent on the country in terms of these issues. Unfortunately, again, as all good the forum or discussion webinars actually come about. Parang we usually lack time for continuing this very good open forum. So what we'll do again is just maybe for those who have additional comments or questions, we will group them together. And if you have time, maybe you can also further respond to these questions. So again, thank you very much, Elaine, Joanne, Elvin, Veronica, and also Nandi. Unfortunately, couldn't make it to this webinar. For all of your presentations, your contributions, your thoughts on this very important issue. So on behalf of the SDSN and also the Ateneo de Manila, Ateneo de Davao, and Ateneo de Cagayan Consortia, we'd like to give you this certificate of appreciation to Dr. Fernando Aldaba for their contributions to this webinar. Also to Elaine, so thank you very much, and also Joanne for presenting the different aspects of social protection and food sustainability programs in your different organizations. And also to Elvin and also to Veronica, maraming salamat for also giving your reactions and your thoughts on this very important issue. We hope that we can invite you again in a future webinar. As we said, introduction, we've been doing this for the past 2 years to highlight the issue of food sustainability in the country. So maraming salamat. So at this point, I will call on Eman Delocado, the country manager of the SDSN Philippines, who will give additional reminders on upcoming events related to this important topic.
Okay. So before we have our group photo, we would like to provide some announcements. Okay. So we would like to invite you to the next events of SDG 2 Zero Hunger Program. So the next webinar in the series will be on July 19, 2023. That's on Wednesday. We are, however, moving the webinar from 3 to 5 p.m. to 2 to 4 p.m. So we are setting it 1 hour earlier. The topic is nutrition, health, wash, and food safety. So we hope to see you there. The poster and the sign-up links together with the lineup of speakers will be released at a later date. Next up, we would also like to invite you to join the Facebook group on Food Systems Community Dialogue. So it's a group for enthusiasts of food systems. So please join the discussion. News articles are being posted here as well as lineup of events. Okay. In a very special way, before we have the group photo, allow me to thank the person or allow us to thank the person behind the recent SDG2 webinars. This will be his last webinar with the SDG2 Zero Hunger program or project of SDSN Philippines Secretariat. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you to the very dependable and to the very trustworthy person behind the SDG2 webinars, the one who answers all your emails, sets up all the registrations, who send us all the certificates to everyone. Mr. Javi Bakiran. Thank you, Javi. Thank you for bearing the warmth of your personality amidst all the challenges in the program. And Javi, from the bottom of our hearts, we wish you the best of luck in what lies ahead. Okay.
Thank you, Sir Eman, and thank you everyone then from the team. So at this point, we'll be taking our group photo. We invite everyone who can to kindly turn on their cameras. I'll give everyone a few seconds. Okay, so there are 5 panels, so kindly bear with me as we go through the 5 panels. Smile, everyone. Panel 1. Okay. Panel 2. Okay. Panel 3. Panel 4. And last one. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Before we end, we'll just post the evaluation link, so that so maybe Javi. So thank you again, Javi. Okay, so link to the evaluation forms. Okay, again, on behalf of the SDG2 working group of the Ateneo universities and also the SDSN. So we'd like to thank everyone. We'd like to thank our speakers and also the actors for today. And we hope to see you again in the webinar that coming up in July and also the 2 other webinars after that. So maraming salamat.